Corabelle entered her kitchen, enveloped by the warm scent of the candle she had lit, like a comforting embrace. The delightful aroma from her earlier cooking still lingered in the air after several hours. A quick look at the clock on the stove revealed it was already 9 o'clock in the evening. Her day had flowed by like a swift river. With a grin, she reached for her tea bags, craving a cup to soothe her body and ease her throat. Her fingers glided over the various flavors neatly. Arranged in a transparent tea container, they paused on the chamomile. She picked up the mug that her late father had given her, adorned with her name in elegant gold and blue, her two favorite colors. This cup brought back memories of the countless times she shared tea with her father, filled with love and laughter in her cozy kitchen. As she filled her kettle and placed it on the stove to heat, she glanced outside and noticed the rain falling, sending shivers down her spine. The raindrops waltzed across the window, creating a calming backdrop. When the kettle began to whistle, she removed it from the heat and poured the boiling water into her mug over the tea bag. She observed as the water transformed into a deep amber color, then added honey while stirring her tea. Just as Corabelle raised her cup to take a sip, a loud, unexpected knock on the door startled her, causing her to scald her lip on the hot tea. Confusion washed over her as she turned her gaze toward the front door. Who could be knocking so insistently at this hour? She wondered. Taking a deep breath, she slowly approached the front door, switched on the porch light, and opened it cautiously. The porch light cast a glow over the small space surrounding the house as she stepped out just enough to stay dry. She peered into the darkness, searching for any pranksters that might be hiding behind the trees. The wind whipped through her hair, sending strands flying into her face. Just as she was about to retreat inside, a shadowy figure caught her attention, lurking next to a tree in her front yard. The dim moonlight provided just enough illumination for her to recognize it was a person, but not who they were. "Who's there?" she called out, her voice shaking with fear. A knot tightened in her. Stomach as dread washed over her. The figure remained motionless and silent. Goosebumps prickled her arms, and the hairs on her neck stood on end. Could this be an intruder, she wondered, her mind racing with terrifying scenarios. "I'll call the police if you don't leave. My property. You have no right to be here," she yelled, her heart pounding wildly. She could feel each heartbeat thudding in her throat as she swallowed hard. Suddenly, a blood-curdling scream erupted from the figure, a sound so chilling it sent shockwaves through her. A womanly silhouette lunged toward her. Corabelle screamed and quickly slammed the door shut, her fingers trembling as she fumbled with the lock. Just in time, she managed to secure the door against the approaching figure. A loud knock reverberated through the house, causing her to stumble backward and land on her rear. Corabelle scooted closer to the door, pressing her back against its cool surface. Her heart raced uncontrollably, and she instinctively placed a hand over her chest. Adrenaline surged through her veins, fueling her panic as her breath quickened. What was happening? The question spiraled endlessly in her mind. Who was that woman, she pondered, recalling the terrifying visage of the stranger. The woman had intense eyes, a ghostly pallor, and scars marring her face. She scanned the room, searching for anything she could use as a weapon. She stood up, snatched a kitchen knife from the counter, and hurried back to her door. Her hand trembled as she struggled with the lock. With a frantic twist, she managed to unlock it and swung the door open. The porch light still illuminated the area from earlier. Rain continued to pour down relentlessly. She glanced out into the stormy night, only to find that no one was there. The streets were completely empty. To her astonishment, the woman had disappeared, as if she had evaporated into thin air. Taking a deep breath, she shut the door behind her. Maybe it was all just a figment of her imagination. The thought flitted through her mind. She returned the knife to the counter and walked back to her mug. A sigh escaped her as she realized her tea had gone cold. She poured the lukewarm tea down the sink and tossed the used tea bag away. Then she placed the kettle back on the stove to boil again. While waiting for the kettle to heat up, she tidied the counter and organized the cookbooks that were cluttered next to the stove. Moments later, the kettle began to whistle, startling her. She quickly removed it from the heat and poured the boiling water over her fresh tea bag. Picking up her mug, she glanced out of the kitchen window once more to ensure the woman wasn't lurking outside. Satisfied, she turned and headed into the living room. She turned on the TV and started scrolling through channels until she landed on the Cartoon Network. Colorful and lively characters frolicked across the screen as she tried to erase the woman's image from her thoughts. She hoped that immersing herself in the show would help alleviate her anxiety and calm her nerves. Before long, she found herself chuckling softly at the antics of the animated characters. The next morning, the cheerful chirping of birds roused Corabelle from her slumber. Sunlight streamed through the curtains, casting a warm glow on her living room table and mug. It took her a moment to realize she had dozed off as she rubbed the sleep from her eyes, trying to fully awaken. With a sigh, she reached for her mug, got to her feet, and made her way into the kitchen. As she entered the kitchen, she turned on the faucet to clean her mug. The image of the woman's face suddenly flashed in her mind, and she wished it was just a figment of her imagination. After rinsing the mug, she placed it on the drying rack and headed up the stairs to shower and prepare for the day ahead. She selected her outfit for the day and made her way to the bathroom for a refreshing shower. She set her clothes, a cozy oversized sweater paired with jeans, on the sink's edge and turned on the shower to warm the water. Once it reached the ideal temperature, she stepped in, letting the water cascade over her. The steam began to rise, soothing her nerves and warming her skin. Reaching for the shampoo, she poured some into her palm and started lathering her hair. The delightful scent of lavender filled the air as she massaged the soap into her locks. Suddenly, the lights began to flicker. She paused briefly and peeked behind the curtain, but there was no one there messing with the lights. With a shrug, she leaned back under the water to rinse out the shampoo. Corabelle stopped for a moment as the sound of children's laughter echoed in her ears. Water streamed down her face, making the soap blur her vision. She quickly rinsed the soap from her eyes and cautiously glanced around the edge of the curtain, searching for any signs of someone in her bathroom. Her heart raced as the overhead light flickered again, sending panic coursing through her as she hurriedly rinsed her hair. Once she was done, she turned off the water, and the bathroom fell into an eerie silence. The warmth from the shower lingered in the air, wrapping around her like a comforting embrace. Summoning her courage, she pulled back the shower curtain, only to be met by a sudden rush of cold air. She swiftly grabbed her towel and wrapped it around herself. As she stepped out of the tub, her bare, wet feet touched the soft, fuzzy bathroom mat beneath her. A puzzled expression crossed her face as she realized the bathroom door was ajar. She was convinced she had shut it tight before stepping into the tub. The house felt unnervingly quiet, with only the sound of water droplets dripping from the shower faucet breaking the silence. She nudged the door open wider and peered down the hallway. "Hello?" she called out, her voice quivering slightly. Silence greeted her in return. Maybe she was just talking to herself after all. Her mind raced with anxious thoughts. What if someone had been in her home? Were they still lurking around? Wrapped in her towel, she ventured down the hallway, leaving her clothes behind in the bathroom and a small trail of water in her wake. Upon reaching her bedroom, she opened the door and scanned the room. The bedside lamp emitted a soft glow, which added to her confusion since she distinctly remembered turning it off before heading to the bathroom. Her gaze quickly shifted to the closet door. Heart pounding and breath quickening, she approached and swung it open, but to her relief, it was empty. Turning back to the bedroom door, her bewilderment lingered. Could that woman from last night have been real? Was she losing her grip on reality? Corabelle pondered, the weight of her father's death heavy on her mind. Determined to finish getting ready for the day, she returned to the bathroom. Just as she stepped inside, her phone began to ring. Glancing at the screen, a smile broke across her face when she saw it was her boyfriend calling. "Hello, my love," she greeted cheerfully, slipping into her pants. "Are you on your way?" he asked as she switched him to speakerphone. "Yes, I'm getting dressed now. I just finished my shower," she replied, pulling her shirt over her head. After A brief conversation. She ended the call and took a moment to collect her thoughts. The idea of sharing her strange experience with her boyfriend flitted through her mind. What if he thought she was losing it? Once she finished dressing, she looked at her reflection in the mirror, brushed her lovely brown hair, and applied some makeup to prepare for the day ahead. As she drove towards her boyfriend's house, she found herself halted at a red light. It was a serene Saturday morning. The roads were deserted since most people were still tucked in their beds. While waiting for the light to change, she casually glanced to her right and was taken aback to see a woman standing by her passenger side. It was the same woman she had encountered the previous night. In an instant, the woman let out a scream and began banging on the window. Fear surged through her as she screamed and pressed down on the gas pedal. Who was this woman? And why was she trailing her? Her mind raced with questions. She tightened her grip on the steering wheel as she sped towards her boyfriend's place. Upon arriving, she quickly gathered her things and walked up to his front door. Taking a deep breath, she prepared herself before stepping inside. She wasn't quite ready to divulge what had just happened. As she pushed the door open, she was met with a playful boo from him, intended to give her a little scare. Startled, she shrieked and dropped her purse and phone onto the floor. He pulled her into a warm embrace, chuckling at her startled expression. "You should have seen your face," he laughed, planting a kiss on her forehead. "You know I'm easily frightened, Sebastian," she replied, burying her face in his chest as she hugged him tightly. He helped her gather her belongings from the floor, and they made their way to the living room where his dog bounded over to greet her. The energetic Akita Pit was full of life. As she settled onto the couch, the dog jumped up beside her, playfully licking her arm. She couldn't help but smile as she stroked the dog's fur. Sebastian then approached her, holding a letter that her late father had written. Confused, she took the letter from him. "What's this?" she asked, unfolding the envelope and pulling out the letter to read it. "He asked me to give it to you after he passed away. I never opened it," Sebastian explained, sitting across from her with his gaze focused on her reactions. Meanwhile, the dog continued to bounce between them, licking both of their arms, blissfully unaware of the emotional exchange taking place. She began to read the letter aloud. "My beloved daughter," she read aloud, as Sebastian inched closer to her and the dog, causing the pet to leap off the couch. She continued reading the letter while he moved even nearer. "If you're reading this, it means I am no longer by your side. I want you to understand just how deeply I love you. No words can truly capture my profound affection for you, my sweet girl. I wish I could be there to help you navigate the challenges life has thrown your way. I must sincerely apologize for what I'm about to reveal. Our family is under a curse. You are destined to take the life of someone you cherish. My great-great-grandfather took her son's life, and in return, she placed a curse upon us. I allowed you to live so that you could be the one to break this curse." As Corabelle finished reading the letter, she was taken aback by the sight of a witch laughing before her. The witch's laughter grew louder as she dashed into the kitchen, with Sebastian trailing behind, unaware of what was unfolding. He couldn't perceive what she was experiencing. "You're hallucinating again. Please take your medication. I've been urging you to do so for the last hour," Sebastian said, holding out her bottle of pills. Ever since the tragic loss of her parents in a car accident, Corabelle had been plagued by intense hallucinations that tormented her day and night. In a moment of panic, she grabbed a kitchen knife, turned towards Sebastian and stabbed him in the throat. He clutched his neck as blood poured from the wound. Corabelle screamed in terror and collapsed to her knees, realizing that the witch had never existed. There was no letter from her father. It had all been a product of her imagination. The paper in her hand was merely her prescription. She stood up, her mind racing with dread over what to do with Sebastian's body. Suddenly, an idea struck her like a bolt of lightning. With shaky hands, Corabelle dragged her boyfriend's lifeless form onto the living room rug they had chosen. Together, she wrapped him tightly to prevent him from slipping out as she pulled him outside into the backyard. She drenched him and the carpet in lighter fluid before igniting them both. She felt a sense of relief knowing his neighbors were away, on holiday. As she observed the flames spring to life, she quickly dashed back into Sebastian's house to tend to his blood. Grabbing the bleach, she set to work cleaning up the mess. Once she was done, she stepped outside with his clothes and photographs in hand. The air was thick with smoke. With shaky hands, she tossed each photo into the fire one by one. The sound of the paper crackling as it burned resonated in her mind. With every piece that turned to ash, she sensed fragments of her heart disintegrating. Connie rushed down the corridor, her gaze flicking anxiously from side to side. This section of the building made her uneasy. It was where the newly constructed middle school wing met the original school structure, which had stood for over a century. At the heart of this intersection were two distinct staircases. The old and new buildings side by side resembled a grotesque double spine, with long rib-like hallways extending in every direction. She took a left turn, feeling a rush of adrenaline as she rounded the bend. The lights in the next hallway had gone dark, and she sensed the shadows creeping toward her, almost inviting her in. Within this twisted spine and ribs, where warmth and illumination should have been, only darkness awaited her. Still, she pressed on, drawn into the void. As she ventured deeper, an unsettling feeling washed over her that something was lurking in the shadows, waiting for her. It felt like it was stalking her, and she couldn't shake the thought that whatever it was wanted to consume her whole. "There she is," he shouted, clapping his hands together as he moved towards her. Just as she began to speak, he grasped her shoulders tightly. "Dad, what's happening?" she asked, turning to face him, fear washing over her. The abyss truly seemed to be pursuing her, and now it felt like it was peering through her father's eyes. "Rick, thank you," he said in his smooth southern Tennessee drawl. "We better hit the road before... May God..." His voice felt louder than necessary, echoing in her ears. Once inside the car, the friendly demeanor her dad had shown at the office vanished completely. He drove erratically, swerving across lanes. He appeared disheveled, exhausted, and strangely unfamiliar. Summoning her courage, Connie managed to ask, "What's going on?" "It's Y2K, Connie," he yelled, slamming his hand against the steering wheel. Startled, she flinched and turned her face toward the window, regretting that she had spoken up. There still exists a general state of either denial, complacency, or even apathy about both the reality and potential effects of Y2K. He cranked up the radio, and Leonard Nimoy's voice filled the car. At the stroke of midnight, January 1st, 2000, credit cards and ATMs may cease to function, airplanes and trains may come to a halt. Connie squeezed her eyes shut. Finally, she felt the car take a left into their driveway. Gathering her courage, she peeked out and felt a wave of relief wash over her when she spotted her mom's car parked there. "Honey, I'm really sorry, but this is just too much. He keeps calling and calling. Why don't you take the rest of the day off?" Mrs. Davenport gently suggested. "I apologize. He's anxious about the new year, Y2K and everything." Anna's voice dwindled as she spoke, eventually breaking into soft, desperate sobs. Mrs. Davenport wrapped her arms around her, offering comfort. As Anna cried, she reassured her. "God will keep you safe, my dear. Move forward with faith and hold your little ones close." Anna nodded, gathering her belongings. She needed to find Tyler and locate Connie, and fast. Matt had always possessed a certain intensity, which Anna attributed to his reserved demeanor. After nearly 5 years of sobriety, he had become quieter, but his temper still lingered. He could be harsh at times, yet he also had the ability to make her feel cherished. His personality was a complex mix of love and cruelty. For 10 long years, he had kept her in a cycle of abuse and confusion, but that was coming to an end. Anna had finally consulted a lawyer, someone connected through a friend. With a hidden savings account and some financial assistance from her parents, she devised a plan to escape. She had to do it. The impending Y2K crisis pushed him over the edge. He was convinced that all computer systems would fail, that planes would plummet from the sky, and that chaos would reign on Earth. Yet Anna felt like chaos had already engulfed her. She stepped right into it yesterday when she had to enter. The shed, his lair. She dreaded going in, but the neighbors had been complaining about an awful smell. Delilah had warned her that authorities would be called if the situation wasn't resolved. As she climbed into the car, she struggled to maintain her composure, haunted by the image of what she had witnessed. Anna opened the shed door, and the stench hit her like a wall. Flies buzzed around, their incessant noise resembling a sinister choir. It was overwhelming, but she forced herself to step closer. Sunlight streamed into the center of the wooden structure, illuminating the grim reality of her husband's mental state. She staggered backward, clutching the workbench as her mind grappled with the horrifying scene before her. 6 rabbits hung in a circle from the low rafters, their bodies split open from chest to groin. The skin was pinned back with safety pins, revealing their insides and allowing them to dangle over a pentagram outlined in salt on the floor. Their entrails were withered, dark, decaying, dripping. In the center of the star, Y2K was scrawled in black wax alongside a large image. Blood covered a person's face, but Anna recognized it as a photo of Connie. Each point of the pentagram was adorned with a black candle. Pictures of Anna filled each triangle of the star. The hearts of 5 rabbits had been impaled into the center of her photos with long nails, anchoring both her and the organs into the blood-drenched ground. The final heart and a pair of testicles were nailed to the large picture of Connie, the heart affixed to her chest and the testicles placed over her womb. She felt lightheaded. Something sticky clung to her palm. What is that? Turning around in shock and horror, she found herself staring at the head of a large black goat. Its eyeballs had been yanked from their sockets, left dangling from the skull. The beast's massive testicles had been removed and stuffed into its mouth, while its tongue dangled from a dislocated jaw. Flies and maggots swarmed everywhere, feasting on the tongue, what remained of the creature's eyes, and crawling in and out of its ears and nostrils. The insects created the illusion that the head was moving, twitching and vibrating as if it were alive. Anna's vision began to blur. The flies shifted their focus onto her. They crawled across her face, biting her skin. They engulfed her like a dark force intent on consuming her. She desperately swatted at the flies as her gaze fell upon more photos of Connie scattered across the altar, surrounded by red candles carelessly placed around them. He had taken the reproductive organs of the rabbits and arranged them in small clay bowls around the altar. Blood, organs, and fleshy mush mixed with strands of Connie's hair. Anna gasped as her vision faded. The flies invaded her mouth, choking her. She coughed and gagged, then ran away, overwhelmed with tears. Panic washed over Anna as a troubling thought invaded her mind. What if he knows? What if he's aware that I was in there? What if he realizes I'm about to leave? Since stepping out of the shed, she had felt like someone was always watching her. Was it just her imagination, or what if? Connie inside the house, Connie shouted, "Mom!" Tears began to well up in her eyes. Her mom rushed out of the kitchen to her side. "Connie," she exhaled with relief. "What's happening?" Connie asked as her younger brother zipped past, her gym bag in hand, frantically gathering toys. "Is Tyler getting ready to leave?" Mom pressed a kiss on her forehead. "Dad insists we head to Meemaw's. He believes we'll be safer out there in the middle of nowhere and wants..." Anna. "Damn it, Anna. Yes," Mom replied, taking a deep breath. "I want to be out of here in 5 freaking minutes," he said, jabbing his finger at her face. "Daddy. Dad. I'm ready." "That's my boy, Ty. Go to the car and buckle up." Dad turned back to Connie. "Get packed now." With that, he stormed through the back door, slamming it behind him as he headed for his shed. "Connie, hurry. Pack for a few days, just in case." Why couldn't Mom stand up to him? Connie felt the urge to be angry at her mother, but she couldn't bring herself to do it. Her mom looked so shaken and overwhelmed. It was almost as if Mom could read her thoughts when she said, "We'll be okay with Meemaw. She knows how to handle your dad." Connie dashed upstairs to her room and shut the door. Her heart raced as hot tears streamed down her cheeks. She didn't want to leave. Tonight was supposed to be Liz's birthday party. It wasn't fair, yet she still packed her things and made her way outside. Mom was loading bags into the car while Tyler sat in his seat, engrossed in his new Tamagotchi. Connie placed her bag on her seat and quickly ran back inside to grab her iPod. As she approached her backpack, she spotted Dad standing at the kitchen sink, singing to himself, "Are you washed in the blood? In the soul-cleansing blood of the Lamb?" Meemaw resided on the outskirts of a quaint little town nestled in the Appalachian Mountains. Her closest neighbor was a good 4 miles away, making her quite the solitary figure. A self-proclaimed doomsday prepper, she wasn't particularly skilled at it. Instead, she had veered off course and turned into more of a hoarder. The cramped, cluttered corners of her filthy home made Connie feel like she was ensnared in a labyrinth, but at least it offered an easy way to vanish within its confines. It seemed that Meemaw had a unique connection with Dad. Perhaps she could lend a hand. As her favorite Goo Goo Dolls song began to play, she shut her eyes and allowed herself to be swept away by the comforting melody. When she came to, she was taken aback by how she had drifted off. Mom was firmly demanding, "Why aren't we heading to the house?" Connie exchanged glances with Tyler, who was already looking back at her. Dad disregarded Mom's concerns and kept driving along the dirt road that bordered Meemaw's land. "Matt, why couldn't she just zip it? All she ever does is whine. Whine, whine. She expects me to just roll over and accept everything she wants. I don't need traitors like her around." The radio fizzled into static, prompting me to turn it off. It was still light outside, but that wouldn't last much longer. "Is she still going on?" Her voice was getting softer, as if she was trying to soothe me, treating me like I'm some kind of child. "Yes, Master. You hold all the power. Master, you call all the shots masterful. Anna, can you just shut the hell up?" Connie, after what felt like forever, the car finally halted. Dad sat there nervously, wringing his hands on the steering wheel. Then he chuckled. "You want to know what's really happening?" "This is it," he exclaimed loudly, bursting into laughter once more. "You'll see what I've been up to and you will thank me and call me savior." His words shot out like a venomous snake striking its target. "I did all this for you. And what the hell are you doing for me? What have you ever done for me, Anna?" he bellowed, his final words ringing so loudly that Connie's ears buzzed before he slammed the door with such force that the entire car shook back and forth. Mom quickly exited the vehicle, glancing back at them as she stood up. The children were suddenly abandoned, their ears still ringing from the fury that had just erupted. Matt made his way to the rear of the car, began unloading items, and then stepped into the clearing, bending down to examine a metal door sticking out of the ground. Anna could hear herself shouting, sobbing, and pleading with him. "This is not okay, Matthew. I knew we shouldn't have come. You can't force us. We can't take the kids in there. It's terrifying. Nothing bad will happen. Trust in the Lord, for He is our strength. We have a life. Please," she grasped. His right shoulder, but he seized her arm in response. Looking up into his eyes, she was met with nothing but darkness. His pupils were dilated, and his usually blue eyes appeared colorless. It was as if an eclipse had overtaken his soul. The only glimmer of light was swallowed by shadows. He drew her closer, his face twisting into a grotesque mask. "Bet told me you visited Lucas's office. You're leaving me, aren't you?" Anna felt herself shrink, trembling all over, consumed by sheer terror. Her husband's laughter echoed around them, feeding off the fear he was instilling in her. Mad, I tightened my grip on her arm, feeling the pressure of my fingers digging into the bones. "It must hurt," I thought to myself. I shut my eyes. The moment has finally arrived. I squeezed Anna as hard as I could before forcefully pushing her to the ground. "Who's in control now, you foolish woman?" I unscrewed the flask and drank deeply, until my mouth was ablaze. "You really believed? You really fucking thought I wouldn't find out?" Anna was begging, rising to her feet and wrapping her arms around herself as she started to retreat. If it weren't for the new year approaching, I might have savored keeping this fear alive. Torture her like she's tormented me. Ungrateful wretch, I was going to show you mercy. Let you help Connie raise pure children of the earth. Belial said you can't have light without darkness. Connie is a woman now. He came to me through the goat. His serpents through the rabbits. Y2K will purge the earth of human sins. We are chosen to restore the light to this world, and that's my intention. They instructed me to prepare the bunker for a 2-year period. It was ample time to begin nurturing a new child of God, a sovereign who would traverse the ruins and restore humanity's dignity. I gazed up at the heavens. Raindrops began to fall. Storms were indeed here, just as they had foretold. I couldn't help but chuckle, stretching my arms skyward. But the shadows needed attention so that the light could shine through. Connie observed in despair as a gun was pointed straight at her mother. Her father faced her mother, yet his gaze remained fixed on the darkening sky. He began to shout with all his might. My eyes have witnessed the glory of the Lord's coming boom. Connie felt herself spring from the car. Her dad rushed to her and caught her in his arms. He hoisted her over his shoulder and carried her across the field before coming to a halt. She heard coughing, choking, wheezing, a terrifying sound that seemed almost otherworldly. She buried her face in his jacket and prayed. Look at her face. Coo! He roared. She sensed her father lowering her to the ground, unable. To support herself, she collapsed to her knees. He carefully positioned the gun against the back of her head. Reluctantly, she turned to face what remained of her mother. Half of her mother's skull was missing, obliterated by the gunfire. The remaining eye was locked onto Connie. She was gurgling, convulsing, foam bubbling from her mouth. Her hand reached out for one last touch with her daughter. Her chest heaved, twitching upward toward the sky. Connie noticed blood pooling around her head like a halo, the warm blood steaming in the chilly December air. The remnants of the right side of her brain began to slide down through the gap where her right eye and ear once were. Connie attempted to grasp her hand. Can't be tolerating non-believers. Out of time for. She was lifted once more. Connie glanced back to see her mother's hand lying on the grass, forsaken. He forced her through the metal door. She tumbled down a ladder and landed on a platform, with the back door of a school bus wide open behind her. What the? The door slammed shut with a loud bang. Connie found herself engulfed in total darkness. She couldn't tell if it had been just a minute or perhaps 10, when suddenly the door swung open again and Tyler was thrown inside. Her father followed closely behind. Click, 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 3 padlocks were secured. Then light flooded the room. She reached out for her brother. In one corner, a rocking chair caught her eye. Dad was leaning over it, making it sway. Back and forth, back and forth. It appeared as though someone was seated there. The horror seemed to stretch on endlessly as she recognized Meemaw. Her hair was frizzed out, her mouth stitched shut, and her eyes forced wide open. Dried blood trickled from her eyes and mouth down her neck, contrasting starkly against her ghostly pale skin. Tyler let out a scream and collapsed, unable to cope with the nightmarish scene around him. Dad found this utterly amusing. His laughter echoed with a sinister, raspy tone. He seized Meemaw and planted a kiss on her cheek. She squeaked in response. I knew you'd want her here. Come on, sit on her lap. He cackled even louder as he slapped her leg. She lurched forward, bound by ropes to the rocking chair that kept her from falling. Now we are ready for the new millennium, Dad proclaimed, pointing at Connie. We will be Adam and a pure Eve. He lowered his voice and approached her menacingly. We will bring the kingdom of heaven to earth. Connie squeezed her eyes shut, wishing she could vanish into thin air like she did in the school hallway. The abyss had indeed followed her, and she watched in sheer terror as it lurched toward her. Happy Waidu, her father's voice reverberated ominously. I prefer to keep a low profile at work. Small talk isn't my thing, and I'm not particularly fond of my colleagues. Each day feels repetitive. I write a list, tackle my tasks, and check them off one by one. Most people are aware of this and generally give me space except for Tim. It should have been a clue when I noticed I was the last one remaining in the office, the only one left besides Tim. Tim was leaning against the desk, playing with the replacement iPad he had brought. For one of the students, the fluorescent lights overhead flickered softly, their hum merging with the unsettling stillness of the office after hours. "I just have to let it go," he started, his voice rough, as if burdened by too many late nights and poor choices. "It's been 36 years, and my wife Missy, she tells me, Tim, if you end up in the hospital, I won't know what to say to those people coming for their money." His laughter was empty, bouncing off the bare walls. He looked at me with dark, weary eyes that held something deeper, an underlying tension. Tim wasn't merely the tech guy at the school. Everyone recognized that. He was the person you called when something needed fixing, be it an iPad, a laptop, or even your gambling debts. However, it was only tonight that I began to see the fractures in the facade he wore daily. "See," he continued, "being a bookie requires organization. And, well, you know me, I speak Excel like it's my first language." He managed a smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Tim," I said cautiously, "if it's taking a toll on you, maybe it's time to reconsider." "Yeah, but..." He stopped mid-sentence, glancing out the window where shadows from the streetlights played across the walls. "There's this one thing that keeps me awake at night." I remained quiet, sensing he needed to share. "There was this guy I used to hang out with years back. He was involved in some questionable activities, but I liked him. He always had good bets. So me and 3 other friends, don't worry, you don't know them, we decided to chip in on $1,000 square for the series. My buddy, though, he falls ill, kidney infection, ends up in the hospital. He says, 'Don't worry, Tim, I'll get the money to you once I'm out.' But he doesn't. He takes his medication, leaves the hospital, and we assume everything is okay. Then he falls ill again. That's when his brother intervenes." Tim paused, his mouth forming a tight line. "That brother. There's something off about him. He swindled $60,000 from my friend while he was incapacitated. He even sold his dogs, wasted it all on a boat he couldn't even operate. The worst part? When my friend finally passes away, that brother takes control of the book." The atmosphere in the room felt chillier, as if the air was pressing down like invisible hands, and "Here's the kicker," Tim said, leaning in closer, lowering his voice to a hush. "My friend owed me, a fortune. And that brother? He claims he has no idea where the money went, but I don't buy it. I suspect he still has it stashed away, and I think he's keeping an eye on me." He glanced towards the door, his fingers tapping anxiously on the desk. Years have gone by, but now and then, I spot him, at the grocery store, at the gas station, or I'll hear a knock at my door late at night only to find no one there. It haunts me. I can't shake the feeling that one day he'll come to collect, and not just from me. The room felt eerily silent now, the faint buzz of the lights overshadowed by the rapid thumping of my heart. "Tim," I began, but he interrupted me. "Anyway," he said, sitting up straight and forcing a smile, "if you ever need something, you know where to reach me. Or maybe you don't." With that, he turned and exited, leaving me alone in the office. The door clicked shut behind him and the silence was overwhelming. I sat there for a moment staring at the replacement iPad he had left on the desk. The room felt different now, darker, heavier, as if Tim's tale had cast a shadow. Well, that took me by surprise, I muttered to myself as I started to gather my belongings for the day. Then faintly, I heard it, a knock at the door. When I looked, there was nobody there. The soft sound of footsteps barely broke through the flickering hum of the lights. As I strolled down the hallway, I stumbled upon a business card lying on the floor. One side displayed the name of an unfamiliar contractor, Odin Smarts, accompanied by a simple illustration of a pipe. Curious, I turned it over and saw the words, "Help a buddy out," elegantly scripted on the back. After glancing down the hall once more, I tucked the card into my pocket. pondering whether it had slipped from Tim's grasp as he quietly departed or if it was left behind by the mysterious knocker. Why did he choose to share this with me? These thoughts swirled in my mind as I hurriedly gathered my belongings and made my way to my car. All the while, I battled the overwhelming urge to look over my shoulder, even though I knew I was alone in the building. Or at least, that's what I hoped. The following day, Tim was absent from work. While this wasn't entirely surprising, after all, someone like Tim, with so many years under his belt, had plenty of leave to take before retirement, which was only 2 years away. It still made me pause given our recent conversation and the card I had discovered. However, the day quickly became hectic, and I had more urgent matters to attend to. This pattern continued for the next few days. I decided to reach out to our district office for any updates. As I dialed the number and listened to the ringing, I felt that familiar low hum of the lights flickering, just like they had the other night. A sense of unease washed over me, and I braced myself for news I feared wouldn't be good. He does that sometimes. Just disappears, his supervisor explained. I know he has some sick family or something. Have you been in touch with him? I asked. No, I don't want to bother him. He's pretty high-strung these days. Can't risk him quitting, you know. But he's still handling pools. He cashed my check and put me on a square. Did you call Sandy? I inquired. No, I'm not the kind of weirdo who calls people's wives. With that, he abruptly ended the call. I found myself endlessly flipping that business card around, on my desk. It wasn't my responsibility to track down Tim, and I certainly had no desire to engage with the person he had described. Since he hadn't mentioned a name, I was left wondering if we were discussing Odon or someone entirely different. I figured I would wait a few more days, through the weekend, and then address it first thing Monday morning. When Monday rolled around, there was still no sign of Tim. I kept myself occupied with morning chores, but an unsettling feeling lingered in the atmosphere like static electricity. Eventually, I took out the business card from my pocket. As I did, the overhead lights began to hum, a deep rhythmic sound that resonated through my chest. They flickered erratically, casting shadows that danced across the walls. I punched in the number. The phone rang, each beep echoing louder than the last. Just as I was about to hang up and come up with a new plan, I heard a click that shattered the silence. Someone picked up. Hello? I whispered, my voice barely rising above the now unsteady hum of the lights. There was no reply. Hello? Is anyone there? I called out again, this time with more volume. Suddenly the room was engulfed in darkness. The hum intensified to a deafening peak before abruptly stopping. My heart raced in the ensuing silence. What can I do for you? A rough voice asked, gravelly and unfamiliar, crackling through the line as if it were being pulled from deep underground. The lights flickered back on, brighter than ever, buzzing so violently they seemed on the verge of breaking. Well, I stuttered, my throat parched. I found this card and I'm looking for someone, Tim. Do you know him? The voice on the other end let out a low, harsh laugh. Oh yeah, Tim, I know him. We go way back. Funny thing is, I only help out friends. You a friend? I don't even know you. No, but I like your voice, the man growled. How about this? You show up at 324 Gray Street tonight, 11 o'clock sharp, bring a deck of cards and some cash. Before I could respond, the line went dead, leaving the dial tone buzzing ominously in my ear. Now, I consider myself a rational person. I don't converse with strangers. I certainly don't call mysterious numbers, and I never venture to unfamiliar places at odd hours with money and a deck of cards in hand. Yet, as the day wore on, my options for locating Tim grew increasingly limited. The lights in my office had begun to hum again. This time, the noise was louder, a maddening drone that burrowed into my brain. I attempted to drown it out with various tasks, but as night descended, it became the only sound I could focus on. By the time the clock approached 11, my nerves were frayed. I found myself sitting in the soft glow of my living room, flipping the business card back and forth in my hands. Who was this individual? Was Odon the person Tim had referred to days earlier? Or was this an entirely different situation? The occurrences of the last few days had morphed into something surreal, and the thought of entering a poker game felt just as plausible as walking into a trap. Yet as the clock's hands crept closer to 11, one thing became clear. I was headed to 324 Grace Street. The house stood as an old Victorian, its paint peeling and windows darkened. A solitary street lamp flickered nearby, casting dancing shadows. Across the porch, I paused, the hum of the streetlight above mirroring the one that had tormented me at the office. My breath formed clouds in the chilly night air as I reached for the doorknob. It turned smoothly, and the door creaked open. Inside, the atmosphere was stale, thick with the odor of cigarette smoke and something metallic. Faint voices murmured from somewhere below. My heart raced as I navigated the dimly lit hallway, the hardwood floors creaking beneath my feet. To my left, a staircase led down into the basement, where the voices grew more distinct. Laughter, hushed conversations, the clinking of glasses. I approached the basement door and pressed my hand against its cold surface. Gathering my courage, I pushed it open, revealing a steep staircase that descended into an orange glow. The light flickered as if illuminated by a dozen mismatched bulbs, casting shadows that danced along the walls. At the foot of the stairs, I hesitated. The room was otherworldly. A long table dominated the area, cluttered with poker chips, playing cards, and empty glasses. Seated around it were a collection of characters so bizarre that I had to blink to ensure I wasn't imagining things. Tim was present, slumped in his chair, his face pale and gaunt, his usual fatigue replaced by something far darker. Sandy, his wife, sat opposite him, her hands shaking as she shuffled her chips. But the others were not entirely human. A man with sunken eyes and skin that appeared to droop off his bones focused intently on his cards. Next to him, a woman in a ragged dress moved with an eerie grace, her fingers unnaturally elongated as they played with a pile of chips. Another player, his face hidden beneath a wide-brimmed hat, exhaled smoke from a seemingly endless cigarette. And there were others, shadowy figures whose shapes flickered like mist, their presence sending chills through the air. Tim was the first to spot me. "You came," he said, his tone flat and lacking any surprise. "I didn't think you'd actually show up. What is this?" I whispered, my voice barely rising above the noise of the room. "It's a game," Tim replied, motioning to the vacant chair next to him. "And now that you're here, we can finally begin." "I don't get it. What are you talking about?" Tim leaned closer, desperation evident in his hollow eyes. "We're playing for everything," he said. "Our lives, our souls, whatever we have left. And now you're part of it." Before I could object, one of the ghastly figures spoke in a deep, guttural voice that resonated within me. "The new player sits, or the game ends now." Tim seized my arm, his grip chilling. "Please," he urged, "you can't leave now. If you do, they'll come after you too." Reluctantly, I took a seat. The cards were dealt. The game commenced, the stakes unspoken yet palpable. Each hand felt heavier than the last, the atmosphere thick with tension. The ghastly figures played with unsettling precision, their otherworldly stares piercing into me with every move I made. Tim, Sandy, and I struggled to keep pace, each round costing us more chips and more of ourselves. "This is madness," I hissed at Tim during a brief lull. "What happens if we lose?" Tim avoided my gaze. "You really don't want to know," he replied. "But trust me, you won't leave here alive." The game dragged on, minutes blending into hours. My pile of chips dwindled, and the room seemed to darken with each hand played. Sandy folded during a crucial round and was instantly yanked from her seat by shadowy hands that emerged from the gloom. Her screams echoed momentarily before silence. Enveloped them. I turned to Tim, my heart racing. "We need to put an end to this." Tim's lips twisted into a bitter smile. "You think I haven't tried," he said. "The only way out is to win." The cards were shuffled and dealt once more. My hands trembled as I reached for them. The dim, flickering lights created elongated shadows across the table. while the other players observed me with a mix of predatory interest and indifference. The final round turned into a dramatic showdown. Tim pushed all his chips in, his expression serious yet resolute. I had no choice but to do the same. The otherworldly opponents mirrored our actions, their movements disturbingly composed. When the cards were finally revealed, I gasped in surprise. A royal flush. The others groaned, their figures flickering and fading like dying flames. Tim looked at me in shock as the shadows around us began to retreat. "You did it," he murmured, his voice barely audible. "You really did it." As the room started to disintegrate, the eerie figures dissolved into the faint light. The table, the chips, and even Tim gradually vanished, leaving me alone in the darkness,